We don't have any formal identification of these human remains yet, but it is reasonable to work on the theory that this tragically is the body of Jay Slater, thereby bringing to end 4 weeks of what was often conspiracy theorizing nonsense and claptrap, and finally the worst ending possible for those who loved Jay. The facts that were known at a very early stage, in other words, at around 8:30 a.m. on the day that Jay went missing, was that he was somewhat lost. He had 1% battery power left on his mobile phone, and he had no water or other drink. It was also suggested that he'd cut himself on a cactus. And all those facts would indicate that this perhaps was a man in rugged, unfamiliar terrain who was clearly going to be getting into difficulties in a short space of time. Some people chose to ignore those facts as they were known and go off into wild, hurtful, damaging, unnecessary theorizing about stolen watches, getting on yachts, and a lot of other kind of drivel. Perhaps it would appear that the Guardia Civil, who were better placed to make a judgment call, bearing in mind they knew more than anyone, perhaps their initial theory was right all along. What we do know is that the Guardia Civil called upon the resources that they had available to them at the time. There was use of a helicopter, drones, dogs, a mountain rescue team, some firefighters with experience of fighting bushfires in that kind of territory, and some of the Guardia Civil's own officers. They were supplemented some days into the search with further dogs brought in from Madrid. And yes, if they had been able to mobilize a battalion of 1,000 soldiers, for example, then I suspect the answers could have been discovered much earlier. But given the resources that they had, and doubtless other priorities that the Guardia Civil have on Tenerife, like keeping the peace and detecting crime, I think they probably deployed all the resources that they reasonably felt they could do at that time. Ravines, crevices, caves, very tall drop-offs into areas that are almost untouchable, cannot be reached by people searching on foot, presents a vast challenge. And to scour every square inch of every square metre is, quite frankly, impossible. Of course, they could always have done more had they had the resources. That's inevitable that people are going to say that. But given what they had available, what they knew at the time, and what they decided was a working theory or a working hypothesis, as the British police might call it, then I think the discovery of these remains might suggest that if they weren't in the right place, they were certainly on the right track, for want of a better word. What is undeniable is that the Guardia Civil can make huge improvements in how they handled the release of information to the media and how they handled the release of information, more importantly, perhaps, to families and loved ones. We didn't see a family liaison officer, for example, being allocated to the family to help them navigate their way through the most difficult of times. And it might well be that the Guardia Civil need to cast an eye towards British policing and how they deal with the allocation of family liaison officers in situations such as this. They appear to me, the Guardia Civil, to have been somewhat anchored in the past, and a modernisation of their media strategy and family strategy, I think, is long overdue. If there is any good to be taken from all of this, it's that it has shone a light on some of the criminality that takes place on Tenerife, other Spanish islands, and around those costas in southern Spain, where gangsters from the Russian mafia to British organised criminals make their homes and commit their criminal deeds. That might, just might, make people of all ages, a little bit more careful when they venture out to these places to enjoy their holidays.